The wind howled through the lonely hills of Meadowridge that winter night. The snow came down in thick, heavy flakes, blanketing the world in white silence. Roads had vanished under the frost, trees bowed beneath the weight of ice, and even the river had frozen solid. It was the kind of night when no one dared to travel, except for one man, lost and desperate. His name was Thomas Reed, a young teacher who had been traveling home from a neighboring town after visiting a sick friend. He had left early, hoping to reach his village before dark. But the storm had come sooner than expected. Now his horse was gone, frightened away by the wind, and he stumbled through the deep snow, half frozen and barely able to see a few feet ahead. His lantern had gone out hours ago. His fingers were numb, his face burned from the cold, and each breath felt like knives in his chest. He could hear nothing but the moaning of the storm and his own heart pounding in fear. "Please," he muttered under his breath. "Just a light, some shelter." But the hills stretched endlessly, white and silent. Until, at last, he saw it. Far ahead, flickering through the storm, was a small, golden light, a lamp shining from a cottage window. Thomas blinked. For a moment, he thought it was just a dream, a trick of his frozen eyes. But then it flickered again, steady, warm, real. Summoning his last strength, he trudged toward it, his boots sinking deep into the snow. His legs trembled, and more than once he fell to his knees. But that light pulled him on, like hope itself calling through the dark. The cottage belonged to old Martha Gray, a widow who had lived alone for nearly 20 years. Her small house stood on the edge of the woods, away from the main road, with smoke curling from the chimney and a lamp that she always kept burning in the window. "Someone might need it one day," she used to say. The light helps travelers find their way. Most of the villagers thought her habit strange. "No one travels in weather like this," they'd laugh. But Martha only smiled and replied, "You never know when kindness will be needed." That night, as the storm raged outside, Martha sat near her fireplace, knitting a warm woolen scarf. Her gray hair was tied in a bun, her eyes soft behind her round spectacles. The fire crackled, and her cat Ginger purred beside her. Then, suddenly, she heard something, faint but sharp, a knock on the door. Her hands froze. Who could be out there in such weather? She took her lantern and went to the door. When she opened it, a blast of icy wind hit her face, and in the snow stood a man, pale, trembling, half collapsed. "Oh, heavens," she cried. "Come in, quickly." She helped Thomas inside, closing the door against the storm. He could barely stand, his lips blue, his coat stiff with frost. Martha led him to the fire, wrapped him in blankets, and poured him a cup of hot broth. For a long time, Thomas couldn't speak. He simply sat there, shaking, his hands clutching the steaming cup as color slowly returned to his cheeks. When he finally managed to whisper, his voice was weak. "I thought I was going to die out there. I saw your lamp. It saved me," Martha smiled kindly. "That's why I keep it burning." Hours passed, and Thomas rested near the fire while Martha prepared food. She gave him bread and stew, and when he had eaten, she sat across from him, her eyes gentle. "You're lucky, young man." "Another hour out there and you'd have frozen," Thomas nodded. "I was on my way to Oak Ridge Village. My horse ran off. I would have been lost forever if not for you." Martha waved a hand modestly. "Nonsense. Any soul would have done the same." But Thomas knew that wasn't true. Not everyone would open their door to a stranger in the middle of a storm. Not everyone kept a lamp in the window every night just in case someone needed it. When he had recovered enough to speak clearly, Thomas asked, "Why do you live all alone here?" Her smile faded a little. "My husband Robert passed away many winters ago. We had no children. This house, it's all that's left of the life we built." Thomas looked around. The little cottage was simple. Wooden walls, shelves lined with jars and old books, a rocking chair, and a clock ticking softly. Yet it felt warm, safe, full of something that couldn't be bought. Kindness. Martha noticed his gaze. "He was a kind man," she said softly. "During the war, he once brought home a wounded soldier he found near the road. Nursed him back to health for weeks. I suppose I learned from him to never turn away someone in need." Thomas smiled faintly. Then I owe my life to both of you. The storm lasted for 2 more days. During that time, Thomas stayed in the cottage. Martha told him stories of the old days, of village fairs, harvest dances, and how her husband once built this very house with his own hands. Thomas helped where he could, chopping wood, fixing a loose shutter, fetching water from the well. He grew fond of the old woman's gentle wisdom and her calm faith in the goodness of the world. On the 3rd morning, the snow had stopped. The sun rose over the white hills, making them sparkle like silver. I should be going, Thomas said, putting on his coat. The villagers will be worried. Martha nodded, though a touch of sadness flickered in her eyes. Of course. But before you go, she walked to the cupboard and pulled out a small lantern. Take this. Keep it with you when you travel. A little light can save a life. Thomas hesitated. I can't take this. You need it more. Martha shook her head. I've got another. Besides, the lamp in my window will stay burning for the next traveler. He accepted it with gratitude. I'll never forget you, Mrs. Gray, she smiled. And I'll never forget the sound of your knock. Thomas returned to Oakridge safely. When the villagers heard his story, they were amazed. Old Martha Gray, they said. That woman still lives up there? She saved you? She did, Thomas replied, smiling. Her kindness kept me alive. From that day on, he often visited her cottage whenever he had free time, bringing books, groceries, and wood for the fire. Over the months, a deep friendship formed between them. Thomas, who had lost his parents years ago, found in Martha the warmth of a mother's care. And Martha, who had long lived alone, found in Thomas the son she never had. She would tease him, saying, "You chop wood like you're fighting it." And he would laugh, "You make tea like it's a miracle cure, Mrs. Gray." Together, they filled the lonely cottage with laughter. Years passed. The world changed. New roads were built. The railway came closer to the hills, and Thomas became headmaster of the Oakridge School. Yet he always made time to visit Martha. Every winter, the villagers would see a light glowing in her window, the same golden lamp that had saved him years ago. "Why don't you move to the village?" Thomas once asked her. "It's warmer, safer, easier," Martha smiled. "This is where Robert built our home. And besides," she pointed to the lamp, "someone might still need it." Thomas shook his head, smiling. "You're the kindest soul I've ever known." But one winter, the lamp didn't shine. It was a bitter January night, colder than any in memory. Thomas, now in his early 40s, noticed the dark window as he rode home. His heart clenched. He hurried up the snow-covered path and knocked on her door. No answer. He knocked again, louder. "Mrs. Gray." "It's Thomas." Still nothing. He pushed the door open. The room was cold, the fire long dead. In her chair by the hearth sat Martha Gray, eyes closed, a faint smile on her lips, her knitting resting on her lap. She had passed peacefully in her sleep. For a long time, Thomas stood there in silence. The little cottage, once filled with her voice, now seemed unbearably still. He lit the fireplace, as if she might still wake and complain about the chill. He sat in her chair and whispered, "Thank you for everything." When the villagers heard the news, they came up the hill to pay their respects. Many of them had known her as the old woman with the lamp, though few had ever visited her. Now they wept quietly as they carried her to rest beside her husband's grave. After her burial, Thomas returned to the empty cottage. He looked at the lamp in the window, dusty and unlit. That evening, he cleaned it, filled it with oil, and lit it again. The warm glow spread across the snow, just as it had all those years ago, and from that day onward, the lamp never went out. Years turned into decades. Thomas grew old, his hair silver, his steps slower. But every night, without fail, he climbed the hill to Martha's cottage and lit the lamp. Travelers passing through Meadowridge came to know it as the light of kindness. Some said it guided lost wanderers. Others believed it brought good fortune to anyone who saw it through the storm, and those who stopped by the cottage often found a warm fire, a cup of tea, and an old man with kind eyes who would tell them, "This lamp once saved me. Now I keep it burning. For others." One evening, long after Thomas had grown frail and his days were few, a young girl knocked on the door during another blizzard. She was a traveler, lost just like he had been once. Thomas welcomed her, gave her tea, and smiled as she stared at the glowing lamp. "Why do you keep that light burning?" she asked. He chuckled softly. "Because many years ago, an old woman did the same for me. That light, it's not just fire and oil. It's kindness passed from one heart to another." The girl's eyes shone. "That's beautiful." Thomas looked at her and said gently, "Promise me, when you see someone in need, don't look away. Be their light." She nodded. The next morning the storm cleared, and the girl left to continue her journey. Thomas watched her go, his heart full of quiet peace. Later that evening, the villagers found the old man in his chair by the fire, the lamp still burning in the window. He had passed away with a smile, like Martha before him. After his death, the young girl returned to the hill. She took the lamp, kept it lit, and placed it in her own window miles away. And so the light of kindness continued, from one home to another, one heart to the next, and across years. Generations and miles, because kindness, like a lamp in the darkness, never truly dies. It simply finds a new window to shine from.